And they don't know which way to go, but they're looking all around, really trying to find shelter. And they're realizing that the paths are so many, so they become very confusing and they don't know which way to go. At last resolving forward still to fare, till that some end they find, or in or out, that path they take, that beaten seem most bare, and like to lead the labyrinth about, which when by track they hunted had throughout. At length it brought them to a hollow cave, amid the thickest woods. The champion stout eftsoon dismounted from his courser brave, and to the dwarf awhile his needless spear he gave. So they decide to go into they take a certain path which takes them to a cave, which of course we know is not going to be good. So they find a cave, and normally we'd think that would be a great place for shelter, but it turns out not to be a good idea. There's a word here, eftsoons. That's probably a word that you're going to see a lot. It means at once. So that's something you'll want to remember. So they go to this cave, which is really the Cave of Errors, as we will find out in just a little bit. Be well aware, quoth then the lady mild, lest sudden mischief ye too rash provoke. The danger hid, the place unknown and wild, breeds dreadful doubts, oft fires without smoke, and peril without show. Therefore your strokes, sir knight, withhold, until further trial made. Ah, lady, said he, shame were to revoke the forward footing for an hidden shade. Virtue gives herself light, through darkness for to wade. So in this, we finally have somebody talking. And Una tells him to be cautious. And she's unsure about what's going on there. She's afraid of what she calls mischief. But it's really anything. She knows that it's dangerous and that something's going on. We don't always see danger, and I think that's an important point to make about this poem is we don't always know when danger is near. And what I mean by that is this particular poem talks a great deal about the fact that there can be goodness and we don't recognize the danger in it. So we trust people, we trust situations, we trust things that we shouldn't. And I think a lot of this poem is really about that. So she tells him basically to be careful and not to go in, but he, so Red Cross, disagrees. And basically he says, virtue is all I need, because he feels like virtue is light, and if light is what they need, that's where he's going to be okay, because he has God on his side. Yea, but quoth she, the peril of this place I better wot than you, though now too late to wish you back return with foul disgrace, yet wisdom warns, whilst foot is in the gate, to stay the step, ere forced to retreat. This is the wandering wood, the error's den, a monster vile whom God and man does hate. Therefore I read, beware, fly, fly. Quoth then the fearful dwarf, this is no place for living men. So in this section, she is adamant about staying out of the cave. And she tells him not to go in, that it's really a disgrace to do something like that. And he's even getting warned by the dwarf, who also says, we've got to fly, this is not a place. And it's interesting too, because the question is, how does she know? How does she know and he doesn't know? Does she have experience? What is she basing her judgment on? Why is it that she has more wisdom than Red Cross does? But we know that that is the case. So we'll go on to the next stanza. But full of fire and greedy heartiment, The youthful knight could not for aught be stayed, but forth into the darksome hole he went, and looked in. His glistering armor made a little glooming light, much like a shade by which he saw the ugly monster plain, half like a serpent, horribly displayed. But the other half did woman's shape retain, most loathsome, filthy, foul, and full of foul disdain. So now we know a little bit about this monster, and it is half monster, half woman. Hopefully you're thinking a little bit about Grendel's mother right now, because you'll find a lot of similarity here. And it says that the knight could not be stayed. He really couldn't be held back. His glistering, so glistering is shiny. His armor is actually providing the light that he needs to be able to see anything at all inside. And of course he sees this loathsome, filthy monster. And the monster is actually representative of the church, the Catholic Church, which we'll find out even more as we go on. And as she lay upon the dirty ground, her huge long tail, her den all overspread, yet was in knots, and many bouts upwound, pointed with mortal sting. Of her there bred 1,000 young ones, which she daily fed, sucking upon her poisonous dugs, each one of sundry shapes, yet all ill-favored. Soon as that uncouth light upon them shone, into her mouth they crept, and sudden all were gone. So now we know that there are 1,000 little monsters who live inside of her, and they crawl out and feed on her, and when they are nervous or scared, they basically go back in. So it's pretty creepy, actually. And so think about the fact that, especially the light, they are afraid of the light. So that's kind of an interesting fact. So he's got to figure out what to do now. Her tail is really the problem here, because it's that kind of tail that is wrapped up around her. There Dam upstart out of her den afraid, and rushed forth, hurling her hideous tail about her cursed head, whose folds displayed were stretched now forth at length without entrail. She looked about, and seeing one in mail, armed to point, sought back to turn again, for light she hated as the deadly bale, I want in desert darkness to remain, where plain none might her see, nor she see any plain. So she is actually alarmed about what's happening. She doesn't know who Red Cross is, and she does have her tail is coiled, but we know that it has some kind of a stinger on the end of it, and that's what she uses to hurt other people. I also want you to look at the word armed, which is down below. Armed to point, sought back to turn again. The word armed is actually going to be in 2 syllables, so it's armed. If you put an accent over the ed, you're going to see that that's going to add a syllable. And Spencer does that quite a bit in order to have the number of syllables that he needs. And the word bail on the next line means injury. So just to give you a little bit of information about that. Remember that the monster lives in the dark and loves the dark. So that's important to know, because she's accustomed to being in there, whereas Red Cross is not. He's not used to sin. He's not used to deception the way she is, or the way the Catholic Church is, according to Edmund Spencer. So this would be a very interesting battle. Which when the valiant elf perceived, he leapt as lion fierce upon the flying prey, and with his trenchant blade her boldly kept from turning back, and forced her to stay. Therewith enraged she loudly 'gan to bray, and turning fierce her speckled tail advanced, threatening her angry sting him to dismay, who not aghast his mighty hand enhanced, the stroke down from her head unto her shoulder glanced. So the valiant elf is really Red Cross. He's called many things, sometimes a fairy, sometimes an elf, and that's those words are just used interchangeably. So he actually pulls out his blade and tries to hit her with it, and she begins to bray, which is kind of a strange word. It almost sounds like she makes some kind of a noise, like a donkey. I don't know if that's the sound that she's making, but certainly it's going to be something that's not normal. And so he actually doesn't kill her, but he glances a blow, which means he just hurts her a little bit on her shoulder. So he doesn't really do anything that's going to even faze her. Much daunted with that dint, her sense was dazed, yet kindling rage herself she gathered round, and all at once her beastly body raised with double forces high above the ground, though wrapping up her wreathed stern around, leapt fierce upon his shield, her huge train all suddenly about his body wound, that hand or foot to stir he strove in vain. God help the man so wrapped in error's endless train. So the middle of this stanza talks about she's actually, her back half is turned around, and this actually helps her. She winds herself around him, and this is what she does to hurt people. This is pretty typical of her. So this is the end of this particular section. So thanks for hanging in there with me, and bring all of your annotations to school tomorrow.